The Rise and Fall of the Frugal Gourmet. Doomed Planet Podcast, Episode 8. This will be the first of what will be several podcasts about abusive chefs. This abusive chef was Jeff Smith. He made some mistakes early in his career, and they came back to haunt him. In the late 80s, I was publicly wondering about the sexual chemistry between Jeff Smith, the Frugal Gourmet, and his assistant, co-host, Craig Wallum. Nonsense, said a friend of mine at the time, who was a very woke person with strong ties to the gay community. He is a married Methodist minister with children.
You know I love you, baby. And that's why it's time to get funky.
Craig is straight, has a family, and was never harassed by Smith, he says, but as it turns out, maybe there was some one-sided chemistry there on that TV show, The Frugal Gourmet, because there was a lot of domineering and drunken behavior on the set, according to people that worked with Jeff Smith. And also because Jeff Smith was a closeted homosexual pedophile.
And now, advertising from our sponsor.
Fresh chicken makes the best chicken. Fresh chicken makes the best chicken. Fresh chicken makes the best chicken.
I first met Jeff Smith, the Frugal Gourmet, at, predictably, Thai Tung Restaurant in Seattle's International District. This was in 1991. He was sitting at a table alone with a whole array of mostly uneaten dishes in front of him, and he was drunk off his ass. Blotto is the word that I will never use again on this podcast, but that describes the Frugal Gourmet at the point where I first saw him in real life. A major TV celebrity at that time. He'd sold millions of copies of his books. Thai Tung is well over 80 years old. It's a restaurant that serves classic comfort food type Chinese dishes like egg foo young, chop suey, sweet and sour pork ribs, kind of the stuff you'd get in a Chinese restaurant in the Midwest in 1961. It also has an illustrious regular in its past, which is, of course, Bruce Lee. He was at Thai Tung and always ordered the same thing, apparently, beef in oyster sauce. Harry Chan's grandfather, Quan, started Thai Tung in 1935. And inevitably, Anthony Bourdain ate there on July 21st, 2017. What he ordered, roasted duck, mapo tofu, beef with garlic, sweet and sour pineapple chicken, and kung pao chicken. Now that Bourdain is no longer with us, I have to wonder, was Kitchen Confidential ever fact-checked? This is a very entertaining book. It was almost life-changing. I loved it when it came out. But when I go back to it, I see that, well, was there ever a second or third party to corroborate any of these crazy stories? You know, how much fiction is in there? I mean, from what I hear, the publishing industry is a disaster right now, but they do not have the budget to fact-check nonfiction books. So, in other words, you got to trust the writer. Okay, here's my book about things that never happened. It's fiction. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked here. I almost don't even want to bring in someone as cool as Bourdain into sordid matter like this. In 1984, The Frugal Gourmet came out in hardback. It was a huge seller, and then after that, there was just a factory Frugal Gourmet books every couple years. The Frugal Gourmet Cooks with Wine, 1986. The Frugal Gourmet Cooks American, 1989. And then the one book that we did find in the thrift store, we wanted to go with the first book because it's sort of corny and great. The writing is really awkward. And Jeff's books, these Frugal Gourmet books, this is the number one cookbook you're going to find in a thrift store, which is interesting. Maybe because he sold so many copies, and then more and more people maybe heard the bad stuff and said, Let's take this off the shelf so little Timmy doesn't ask who the Frugal Gourmet was. Anyway, so we ended up at the thrift store paying $2 for the Frugal Gourmet Cooks 3 Ancient Cuisines, China, Greece, and Rome, 1987. And yeah, it's entertaining, it's odd in a way, but you can't go wrong with those 3 ancient cuisines. There's a disconnect in the book. He doesn't really go out of his way to connect these certain recipes that, and indicate that they actually were being used in the ancient world. Well, the original Frugal Gourmet book is reviewed on Amazon because, of course, all the reviews are positive. There's just 2 that stand out, the 2 that only mention the crime. Chicago Steve gives the Frugal Gourmet 1 out of 5 stars. Did the Frug enjoy it, prime and tender? I'm upset because I thought this cookbook would help teach me the essence of braising a fresh young piece of meat, skewering it, basting it with natural juices, and then secretly devouring it before anyone knew what was cooking. You get the idea there? There's another one, Smokin' Joe, 1 out of 5 stars. If you only buy 1 book this year, make it something else, anything else, except perhaps for Touched, the Jerry Sandusky story. I guess you know where this episode of the podcast is taking us, to another dark place. I don't want this fucking podcast to be about sex crimes, but when you talk about Jeff Smith, the Frugal Gourmet, you gotta talk about his sex crimes. So in 1984, when the book came out, this whole food porn business was in its infancy. I remember where you had PBS, had the food shows. You had Just Cooking Cajun with Justin Wilson. You should find that on YouTube because that guy is great. I think he's sincere. Then you have the Galloping Gourmet. He might have been wrapping it up around that time, but he's more of a 70s thing. And that's a very insincere person. He tried to make a comeback after he got sober, and he just wasn't fun anymore. Kind of like the Fun Bobby episode of the TV show Friends, that insipid but popular TV show. Fun Bobby is coming to town, and they get all excited. Oh, he's so great. Remember what a great time we had? And then he shows up and he says, oh, I quit drinking. And then they realize, oh, Fun Bobby ain't so fun no more. They didn't use that colloquialism, but you get the idea. Anyway, MFK Fisher, she died in 1992. Didn't do much TV. She was more highbrow. Beautiful writer. A lot of people might have the cookbook, The Cooking of Provincial France by Time Life Books. That came out in 1968. And Julia Child, of course. Again, these are the greats. I'm just trying to set the scenario for when Jeff came up. One big thing was, kind of yuppie food fads, like making your own yogurt and the Cuisinart. People just chopped stuff before, but the Cuisinart was very useful invention. I actually have a vintage, almost mint, 1985 Cuisinart. And it's one of my few material possessions, and I actually do use it, so it's not mint. I lied about that. So compared to some of those more higher brow people, the Frugal Gourmet is schlock. But I did want to, God, this is so prevalent in history. You have a bad man who's a horrible person, but creates some good entertainment. That's the story so many times. So in 1989, the Frugal Gourmet cooks 3 ancient cuisines: China, Greece, and Rome. In his introduction, Jeff Smith notes that it is Chinese New Year, Year of the Snake. The typical cookbook formula has a section in the front about all the tools that you won't actually need. And here, we have an illustration of a Chinese cleaver, which is very essential in China, and it's cool, but you really don't need that. You just need a knife. And you don't need a mandolin in your kitchen unless your kitchen is at a hotel and you have the thankless job of going through like a few cases of carrots at one time. So, a knife will do for that, a sharp knife, like Jeff carried at the chaplain's pantry when he molested those boys.
Wash the bird in soapy water using a coarse cloth to clean the skin thoroughly. Rinse well.
Of course, the other cookbook cliche is a list in the front of all the ingredients that you probably won't need. Here, Jeff lists dried jellyfish. He says they're nice, but you'll never need them. They can be found in, quote, Oriental markets. Dried oysters, no, you'll never need those. MSG, he lists that. It is actually a useful thing. Jeff might be the first to mention it in a mainstream cookbook. He says it's a powder made from seaweed or soybeans used as a natural flavor enhancer. Some people seem to be allergic to it and talk of Chinese restaurant syndrome, in which they have a headache or light chest pains when eating food containing too much monosodium glutamate, MSG. Few are bothered by the natural chemical, and I use it now and then. It should be used sparingly, just as you use salt. So, did the was he the pioneer in starting the fake nonsense about people being allergic to MSG? No, but he perpetuates it here. How MSG got a bad rap, flawed science and xenophobia. That wonton soup headache, the Chinese restaurant syndrome, MSG, and the making of American food, 1968 to 1980. So in this piece, 4/5/38, it's from January 8th, 2016, the writer Anna Maria Berry Jester talks about how there's some racism with the MSG thing and that it's the mysterious spice of the Orient, according to The Joy of Cooking. When it comes to MSG, she writes, the false connections are fairly innocuous for most people, but may still cause unnecessary discomfort for some, either because they are experiencing the nocebo effect or depriving themselves of deliciousness. We all make choices about how we eat. For some people, those decisions are based on supporting local economies, avoiding meat for the humane treatment of animals, or simply wanting to know what goes into their bodies. There's no right or wrong, but it's worth understanding the origins of those choices. In the case of MSG, they appear to have been less about science and more about the culture and politics of the day. She cites a book called That Wonton Soup Headache, the Chinese Restaurant Syndrome, MSG, and the Making of American Food. Fear of MSG in Chinese food is part of the U.S.'s long history of viewing the exotic cuisine of Asia as dangerous or dirty. Quote, it was the misfortune of Chinese cooks to be caught with the white powder by their stoves when the once praised flavor enhancer suddenly became a chemical additive. So the Frug and his team did something smart. They organized a series of TV shows based on this book. It's a little odd. All of the three cultures are shown together in a single episode. There's episodes about appetizers, condiments, mushrooms, lamb. So in the beginning of the book, he introduces each culture. His writing in the first book, The Frugal Gourmet, is super corny and odd. I think he has a better editor this time, but so Peking man is a group of fossil specimens of Homo erectus from roughly 750,000 years ago. Jeff's fact checkers missed that, though. He says the first person to cook meat, according to anthropologists, was Peking man. That was about 250,000 BC. So, yeah, no copy editor or fact checker catching that. This is in the pre-internet days where you might have to go to a library to look that up. But, yeah, he's off by 500,000 years there. Then in the intro to Greece, since the cooks of the day were also priests, they knew how to prepare and butcher meats for the sacrificial rites that gave rise to the Greek banquet. It is easy to see why cooking was the prerogative of men. And Rome, boy, I would love to go back to ancient Rome and have some meals. But they did not have tomatoes or peppers back then. So that would have been sad because I really like the kind of Italian-American food of American origin and Italian influence. Like a pizza in New Haven with clams on it. Or a pizza in New Jersey or a pizza in New York. Some tomato sauce as the base there. Yeah. So in every Frugal Gourmet book, you're going to hear about dry sherry. And that is basically a white wine from Spain, and it's fortified with some spirits. So they pour some brandy or some such in it. And that's odd. That really dates the Frug as being a child of the 80s, or the 70s, leading up until the 80s when sort of cuisine peaked, like making some dry sherry in your Cuisinart. Some animal abuse here, but if you're a chef, hey, what do you think half of the stuff you're cooking, where it comes from? Live drunken shrimp. This is where you put some live shrimp pot with rice wine and they freak out and start jumping all over the place and making a racket against the metal pan. And then you dump them in some boiling chicken stock. I would imagine Jeff made that dish and maybe even on TV. And if he shot the show in Seattle in later years. I think it was shooting in Chicago for a while. I might be mistaken about that. But anyway, if he was cooking it out here, he would have used the local spot prawns, which is a sweet and delicious shrimp or prawn. All right, olive oil, yes, that's essential. It's also historically the most fraudulent of all industries. You know, the Vito Corleone character in Godfather is not made up out of nothing. There's a reason he's in the olive oil business. And I get, if I was in ancient Rome, which is where I want to be right now because the Frugal Gourmet did not exist back then, I guess they would have had pasta carbonara. And Jeff's recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of dry white vinegar. Is there any mention of pasta in ancient Rome? No, so I'm correcting myself there. So I never use vinegar when I make carbonara, but I just use normal bacon, so whatever. Then he has a pasta carbonara with mustard. Add a tablespoon of Dijon. What the? All right, some other things date Jeff here. Canned water chestnuts. No one uses that. That's like a Chinese restaurant in 1954 in like Urbana, Illinois. It's like a Thai tongue might still use that. It's kind of like the canned miniature corn. Like, all right, it's just a condiment vehicle at that point. It doesn't have much nutrition or taste on its own. Here we go, moussaka. Oh, ground beef and ground lamb, eggplant, bechamel sauce. Apparently the Greeks invented the bechamel sauce. I'm not sure if they had nutmeg. It is a possibility. These cultures were trading far and wide in the ancient world. All right, then we talk about pizza. He says it's the second most popular fast food in America. And the Greeks are credited with originating the concept of pizza. They developed the edible plate. So that is what pizza is. The Greeks took this with them to southern Italy. Okay, so it's flatbread with condiments on it. That's all a pizza is. It's a condiment vehicle. And at the end of the book, we see Jeff Smith is an ordained Methodist minister who has brought his ministry to millions of TV viewers. His cooking shows rival network primetime TV programs, reaching 15 million households weekly. He lives in Tacoma, Washington. There you have it. Jeff Smith, the Frugal Gourmet, contributed something to society. He spread happiness and entertainment and cheer with his books and his TV shows. And he taught a lot of people to cook. I gotta say, as a child of the 80s, I was watching his show a bit, and maybe I learned something. So why is it that so many artists and entertainers who have enriched our culture are also shitty, toxic men, or in Jeff's case, rapists?
Are cooks really children who never learned to give up mud pies? I don't think so.
Jeff Smith, 1939 to 2004. The Frugal Gourmet was TV's original celebrity chef. By Kristen Dizon, Seattle Post-Intelligencer reporter. July 9th, 2004. Before Martha and Emeril, there was Smith, whom Time magazine called the most visible gourmet of the 80s. He was part of an earlier movement to get Americans to spend more time shopping for, preparing, and appreciating the pleasures of food. His Frugal Gourmet show on PBS ran for 14 years, from 1983 to 1997. Dizon writes, every show ended with his trademark sign-off, I bid you peace. Seen by an estimated 15 million viewers a week at its height, a huge audience for PBS and a record for a cooking show, the show had its own fan base, the Frugies. In 1991, he moved production of the show back to Seattle. There was a I forgot what Pinnacle Productions. I forgot what it's called. There was a post-production studio in Belltown, right near where I used to live in downtown Seattle, and that's where they edited the Frug shows. There were stories about him being drunk all the time, sitting in the editing room. So there you go. Because I applied for a job there once, and they laughed at me because I was unqualified, but it was fun because we talked about the Frug, because I had questions back then when he was actually active in that studio. Yeah! His 12 books sold more than 7 million copies. As his popularity soared on the PBS show, Smith licensed a line of cooking products such as electric mixers, lemon juicers, and stovetop smokers. So that's a bunch of bullshit, but he's the first, he's the Andy Warhol of celebrity chefs. Like, yeah, I'll do anything for money and anything for fame. Just get my name out there, keep it out there on this bullcrap. Smith was interviewed by the Seattle PI in December 1991. He said his father, Leo, was a carnival barker, and he never really knew him. But Phil Donahue featured Smith on his show, and he had this corny, hippie-ish, self-published, or they say locally published, paperback cookbook. After he was on Phil Donahue, it sold 45,000 books by mail order for $5 each. Then he began filming the Frugal Gourmet at WTTW, a Chicago PBS affiliate. He would fly back and forth between Seattle and Chicago. In 1996 and 1997, Jeff's career ended after years or decades of rumors about bad behavior and not just the drunkenness. We see this article from the Spokesman Review in Spokane, Washington, or as Robert Evans of the Behind the Bastards podcast likes to pronounce it, Spokane.
Podcast shout out. Podcast shout out.
Frugal Gourmet accuser says shame kept him quiet. Tuesday, January 28th, 1997. By the Associated Press. George Heitman was a 15-year-old sophomore at Tacoma Stadium High School when he met Jeff Smith. Now, more than 20 years after their first meeting, Heitman has sued the renowned Frugal Gourmet television chef, alleging Smith used alcohol, threats, and physical force to get him to engage in sex when he was participating in a vocational education program at Smith's restaurant and catering business in Tacoma, which was the Chaplin's Pantry. Why did it take so long? Heitman, who is married and has 2 children, told the Seattle Times shame and fear kept him silent. He also said he thought what had happened was his fault. Smith, 58, an ordained minister, has denied the allegations made in a civil lawsuit filed Thursday in Pierce County Superior Court. A request for an interview left at Smith's test kitchen in Seattle was not answered. About a month after his job began, Heitman says Smith's sexual approaches became increasingly explicit and aggressive. I felt very, very trapped and confused. So Jeff's lawyer said Jeff Smith will defend himself against Heitman's contentions and also show that the allegations are being orchestrated by Clint Smith. Clint Smith, and this is the Spokesman Review AP story, Clint Smith is an ex-convict who alleges that he, too, was raped by Jeff Smith, and that Jeff Smith signed an out-of-court settlement promising him a large amount of money. Heitman said his decision to sue was sealed when he saw a picture of Jeff Smith on the cover of a Christian magazine. We looked for that online and could not find it. So this Clint Smith character is a troubled person, but I think that Jeff promised him an out-of-court settlement. And he's going to pay out a lot of money. So that's sad for his wife and children, but he lost much of his fortune because of these. He had to settle out of court with these alleged victims. January 29th, 1997, by Tom Brune, special to the Chicago Tribune. In 1995, 2 men called a controversial hot talk radio show here to make a startling accusation. They claimed the popular TV chef known as the Frugal Gourmet had sexually abused them when they were teenagers in the 70s. The on-the-air charges raised the volume on what had been a low-level buzz of rumors about Jeff Smith, the TV show host and best-selling cookbook author for the past 4 years. But the buzz did not break into the open until last week, when one of the men filed a civil lawsuit against Smith. The lawsuit is only the latest step in a curious and lengthy dance involving the accusers, Smith and the news media. Smith, 58, has never faced criminal charges for the alleged assaults and has denied the rumors. His attorney, Ed Winskill, repeated the denials after the lawsuit was filed. I did look up Ed Winskill, but again, this is not journalism. It's just a podcast where I can do what the fuck I want, and I'm not going to waste his time, even if he did respond. The Chicago Tribune goes on. Then, in 1993, according to the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, at least 5 news organizations in Seattle began getting visits from a man named Clint Smith, who is no relation to Jeff Smith. Clint Smith claimed that as a teen he had been molested by Jeff Smith. To bolster his case, Clint Smith said he and another man had reached a $3 million settlement with Jeff Smith for alleged abuse when they were minors, and produced copies of cashier's checks cashed in 1991 for large amounts of money. Clint Smith said the checks stopped after he breached the agreement by talking about it with an acquaintance. The checks, however, didn't show the source of the money, and no news organization ran the story. So part of it is I want to protect this rich, elderly white guy because that's just what we do, and part of it is the checks don't have a name on it. But someone like Clint Smith getting a check for large amounts of money written to him, seems likely there was some frug starting to spread out some cash to these kids who are realizing, we can bribe this guy if we're not going to get justice otherwise. So Jeff Smith claims that Clint Smith was seeking revenge. In 1981, Clint Smith was 18. He's convicted and sentenced to 48 months in prison for stealing money from Jeff Smith's business account at the Chaplain's Pantry. Troubled person, Clint Smith. It doesn't mean he was not sexually assaulted by Jeff Smith. Suddenly we have Mark Schaefer. He's filing a lawsuit on behalf of the accusers, but not Clint Smith. A new accuser is a 36-year-old man with a wife and children who alleges that Jeff Smith abused him when he was 15 and a worker at the Chaplain's Pantry deli. The lawsuit seeks unspecified damages. Since news of the lawsuit broke last week, Schaefer said his office has had an outpouring of telephone calls from other men who said they were abused by Jeff Smith. We are investigating and expect to file another lawsuit soon. So apparently Frug, in 1999, it was found out he settled for $5 million. The Tulsa Herald says, Frugal Gourmet's settlement costs are vaguely unfrugal. Jeff in any movies? Let's go to the Internet Movie Database. There's absolutely nothing in his biography here about the scandal or the sexual assault and rapes. That's funny. I don't know why. So they just have this. Jeff Smith was born in Tacoma, Washington in 1939. He grew up in a close family and learned some of his first lessons in food and in frugal cooking from his mother. The close family, but without a dad. All right, they don't have to... Yeah. He was married to a lady from New York named Patty. He began a cooking class. And he opened the Chaplain's Pantry Cooking School in 1972. From there, the Frugal Gourmet was born. In 1995, Jeff Smith hosted the Frugal Gourmet Keeps the Feast for the Odyssey Network. And then he retired from television, leaving behind a legacy of loyal fans. People who learn to cook, eat well, and enjoy life with lots of garlic. And that's it. So in 1995, according to the Internet Movie Database, Jeff Smith retired from television for absolutely no reason. He was done. IMDb trivia. He has 2 sons. We won't mention their names, but again, their surname is Smith, so no one is going to ever find them. In the late 80s, he endorsed a line of cooking products. He has a cameo in the video for Love You Madly by Cake, which is actually quite fun if you want to look that up. He plays himself, of course. He underwent surgery in 1981 to replace a heart valve. He was an ordained Protestant minister. By reading this shit, he got his big break with Phil Donahue. Thank you, Internet. So he makes an appearance in Grumpier Old Men, the movie, in 1995. I looked for that in the online version. I was not finding him. No mention of any rape at the Internet Movie Database. And now it has come to the point where we read some legal documents. Fans of true crime, that's our category apparently, will enjoy that. I really think the Doom Planet podcast is more of history meets tabloid journalism from the left. So we'll see where that takes us.
I know who you are. You're the Frugal Gourmet. Good Lord, you're sloppy.
1, 2, 3, 4. You know I love you when you talk like that, baby.
The Seattle Municipal Court website that on March 13th, 1991, Jeffrey L. Smith was charged with hit and run, pedestrian or bicyclist, parentheses, crime. And case was dismissed. He's got a good lawyer. That's the way it works. But that, clearly could be the sign of a drinking problem, which we know he had. The other sign was he didn't feel bashful about being drunk or just hammered. I won't ever use that word again to describe drunkenness, but it's appropriate here in public. From thesmokinggun.com, July 6th, 1998. Frugal Gourmet settles sleazy sex charges. With the trial only days away, Jeff Smith's TV's Frugal Gourmet has just settled a lawsuit brought by 7 men who claimed that the chef was a predatory pedophile who sexually assaulted them when they were teenagers. Terms of the settlement were not disclosed due to a confidentiality agreement. The Smoking Gun did enjoy Smith's book, The Frugal Gourmet Cooks American, but not for the recipes. We love the cover photo, which captured a beaming Smith who has a turkey in his lap, flanked by 2 cherubic Boy Scouts.
You know what? I've just done it. That isn't the one I want you to see. Don't look at that.
Superior Court of the State of Washington for Pierce County. C. Thomas, P. R. Bell, R. L. Peterson, D. Ronan, T. Ronan, E. Ronan, J. Voynow, and K. Washburn, plaintiffs, versus Jeff and Patty Smith. So now his poor wife is dragged into this. Individually and as a marital community, the Frugal Gourmet Incorporated, a Washington corporation, Frugal Gourmet Productions Incorporated, and Chaplin's Pantry Incorporated. The above plaintiffs come now seeking damages and other relief from this honorable court and jury and show for their complaint as follows. 1. Plaintiffs Thomas, Bell, Peterson, Voynow, and Washburn are all former employees of the Frugal Gourmet Incorporated and of defendant Jeff Smith and Patty Smith in and around Tacoma, Washington. Plaintiffs Ronan are residents of Pierce County, Washington. Specific information identifying these plaintiffs have been made available to the defendants. Frugal Gourmet were Washington corporations doing business in Tacoma, 920 Fawcett Avenue, Tacoma. I looked that up on Google Maps. I think this was a Thai place now or something. I forgot. Jeff and Patty are a marital community. They have not resided together as man and wife for some 20 years, but maintain a marriage for appearances, and one or both of them have resided at all times relevant hereto in the marital residence in Pierce County, Washington. That has gotta, if you were the wife of Jeff Smith, that's gotta hurt reading that, and you gotta read it. Facts, Section 2. Beginning in or around 1972, defendant Frugal Gourmet, Inc. was involved in a food service business known as the Chaplin's Pantry. The firm employed Jeff as a chef, manager, and caterer. The firm at all relevant times employed more than 8 employees. Both before and during his employment as the principal chef and caterer at the Chaplain's Pantry and the Frugal Gourmet Incorporated, defendant Patty Smith and the board's officers and or managers and employees of these corporations knew and had reason to know that Mr. Smith was a predatory pedophile who pursued and sought to engage in sexual activity with minor boys through a common design including the use of alcohol, coercion, and force. While in the course of hiring and directing his employees, defendant Jeff Smith pursued a design, pattern, and practice of grooming high school-age boy employees for sexual intercourse and sought and or coerced sexual intercourse from them by use of alcohol, seduction, and coercion through a common design, pattern, and practice. As a direct and proximate result of defendant Jeff Smith's illegal and wrongful acts upon Plaintiff Bell suffered extremely severe mental, emotional, and behavioral injuries, both in the past and continuing to the present date. In or around 1997, Plaintiff Bell learned for the first time that his chronic mental and emotional disorders had been caused by childhood sexual abuse of him by defendant Jeff Smith. Plaintiff Washburn was the son of family friends to the defendant Jeff Smith and Patty Smith. In the early 70s, Plaintiff Washburn was hired to work at the Chaplain's Pantry and doing catering. During this time, Jeff Smith invited the plaintiff into his home. He used the pretext that he needed the plaintiff's assistance to deliver cooking equipment to the home and was unable to carry them himself. At the marital residence, Smith groomed and sexually molested Washburn when the plaintiff was a minor. That's in violation of RCW Chapter 9A.44, a crime. And he sexually harassed him. That's also a crime. As a direct proximate result, Washburn has suffered, emotional, mental injuries. Plaintiff Thomas, a 16-year-old high school student, in or around 1978, he was a minor employed by Smith, solicited sexual intercourse and sexual acts with him, fondled him, molested him, and engaged in other acts. This whole episode should be a Behind the Bastards thing and not Plaintiff Voino is a 16-year-old. Jeff molested him. So we're just going through all of the kids that Jeff molested. Section 8. The Chaplain's Pantry hired another minor not a party to this action, known here as Boy SC, identified more fully in materials to be filed under seal of this court. Following the same MO, Mr. Smith groomed and pursued a sexual relationship with Boy SC. Clint Smith is mentioned there. And coerced Clint Smith. In or around 1990, all defendants received notice of a legal claim and lawsuit brought by a Tacoma attorney on behalf of Boy SC and Clint Smith. So here it was 1990. Patty Smith, Jeff's wife, would have known at this point if he was being served and his company was that she was a co-owner of, was being served by a Tacoma attorney on behalf of Boy SC and Clint Smith. And everyone else should have known too. And this is one of those showbiz Harvey Weinstein things. Like, everyone knew about this motherfucker. I mean, come on. Everyone in Seattle must have known, at least in 1990, about this. And then he goes all through the whole decade squeaking by before his career is ruined at the end of the decade. At all times relevant thereto, defendant Frugal Gourmet Incorporated and Frugal Gourmet Productions, their board directors, attorneys, etc., knew or had reason to know that the purpose of the agreed-upon settlement payments were for injuries caused to Clint Smith and Boy SC in the course of sexual acts by Jeff Smith. Smith was likely to re-offend if measures were not taken to protect other foreseeable underage victims. In August 1992, Plaintiff D. Ronan was hitchhiking on Pacific Avenue in Tacoma, Washington. Defendant Jeff Smith offered him a ride. He Anyway, go on to section 10. Patty Smith. At all relevant times, Patty Smith was the wife of Jeff Smith. She managed and worked as a chef for the chaplain's pantry and was an officer and director of the Frugal Gourmet Incorporated. They're just trying to establish here that, hey, why didn't you say anything? And here's the sad truth. Patty Smith did not want to turn in her husband because it's not that she was in denial or, no, he couldn't be this monster. It's because she wanted to make the money. Patty Smith first learned her husband was a homosexual and a pedophile in the early 1970s, at a time when Jeff Smith was still serving as an ordained minister and the chaplain of the University of Puget Sound.
Sometimes the gas stove acts like a Methodist. I'm a Methodist, so I can say that it gets hot when it wants to, not when it should, you know.
Patty Smith had reason to know that her husband was engaging in homosexual acts with boys who were then students at the University of Puget Sound. In particular, Patty Smith knew, or had reason to know, and consciously disregarded that her husband was engaged in sex with male UPS students, including a student who worked as a babysitter for the Smiths' young children. Patty Smith further knew, or had reason to know, and consciously disregarded it, that her husband's sexual acts with male UPS students, including the babysitter, occurred at the Smith home and in connection with the students' services to the Smith family, in their house, where their wife sleeps, where their children play with their toys. Subsequent to these incidents, Jeff Smith engaged in sexual contact with minor boys who are sons of friends, who were neighbors, or who were employed in food service. Patty Smith knew of these activities of Jeff Smith and knew further that Jeff Smith's pedophilia was made worse by his alcoholism. At such time as settlements were paid to Clint Smith and boy S.C. as set out above, Patty Smith had reason to know, and did in fact know, that the purpose of these settlements was to keep confidential illegal sexual acts performed by her husband in the course of his employment. She was an officer or a director of the company at the time. Couldn't bear to read every bit of this whole thing, but Jeff Smith does not come out looking good here, and Patty Smith does not either. It might be Patty Smith's alleged lust for money, and that is a crime. That was got other people molested when she could have put a stop to it, maybe. I don't know.
You're either cooking or you're drinking. That's my theory.
So I lived in Belltown for all of the 90s, and I would see Jeff Smith. He had a condo, I guess, above the Pike Place Market, and he would almost daily, he'd go to the market. But he was quite a pathetic sight. He's in one of those motorized wheelchairs. So he's this big, lanky guy tooling around, and had so many opportunities to just even say hi and go up to him. But the truth is, I would have wanted to ask him about this horrible stuff and not, recipes and shit. I'm just not a fake person. I'm like, oh, tell me about dry sherry, Jeff. It's funny, there's a place called the Frontier Room on First Avenue. It was a great dive bar. Then in the mid-90s, it gentrified into a yuppie barbecue place. And he was going there all the time. That was like his place. So maybe because his wheelchair fit they had like a counter area at the front. And then he died. And he's a bad person. And he's gone now, but his legacy is tarnished. And if you go to a thrift store and see his books, you are reminded that he is a criminal. Never charged, though. He bought his way out of it. And if only he could have lived long enough to see kind of modern Me Too stuff. Like if Ronan Farrow had broken the story about Jeff Smith, that would have been good. He's in a wheelchair because he had a heart condition, I guess. And also that's kind of makes you empathetic. Oh, Jeff Smith, he did rape the boys, but look, he's sick and old now. And then he died. Goodbye, Jeff.
1, 2, 3, 4. You know I love you when you talk I love you when you poop like that, baby.
Okay, trying to get our formula down here for this podcast. Again, the Wild World News Network is eventually going to be a series of podcasts. Right now, we're cramming in everything into one episode. We start with a book review or a biography, like in this case, and then we do little sections at the end. And this section is Rusty, the media watchdog. Rusty!
The media watchdog.
So, Tom Douglas, Seattle chef, is in the news. You know, I've always liked Tom. I interviewed him for a newspaper a long time ago. He didn't have to do the interview. It was a very small newspaper. He started in the early 90s with the Dahlia Lounge. I believe that was on 4th Avenue. I do remember it was really close to the crack 7-Eleven. And we called it that because it was a 7-Eleven where they openly sold crack out front. So he became very successful and was a pioneer of some of these locally sourced ingredients and some of those trends. I have fond memories of at least 2 times where me and my friend Ronald, who's a food critic and raconteur, had like $200 lunches at Edda's, and that's his seafood place in the Pike Place Market. It's still there. All Tom Douglas places are really expensive, so don't be in shock when you sit down and see the prices. But those $200 lunches, you know, oysters, some dry white wine, delicious, delicious food. We'll give him that. But as of late, and we'll get to the class action suit, Tom has really expanded. If you know Seattle, then the Belltown neighborhood where he got his start, his restaurants started popping up all over the place. And now they're in the South Lake Union neighborhood. And of course, that's the Amazonia or Bezos town. And now Tom has so many restaurants, I have a hard time keeping track of them. According to TomDouglas.com, there is the Assembly Hall Cafe and Bar. Tucked inside Via 6, Assembly Hall is open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with great juice. So Via 6, that sounds like the name of some yuppie condo. And Tom has close ties to the real estate community. In fact, Tom Graff is a real estate power broker in downtown Seattle, has worked with Tom Douglas for years, getting him into buildings. And I think Douglas has had some sweet deals as a result. Like, well, we're building this big, ugly condo. It's going to have ground floor retail. If you bring one of your places in, that gives us the cachet. And so we're going to give you a great deal on the square footage here for this lease. Or we'll even cut you in on the action, give you part ownership of this ground floor retail space, as selling it as if it was a condo. What else? Brave Horse Tavern, a lively tavern with impeccable beer selection and elevated pub fare. You know, it's not just the normal pub fare, it's elevated, yuppified, gentrified. Fans flock for the crusty pretzels. I hate ad copy. These advertising people suck. Delicious burgers, fish and chips, and seasonal specials. Come watch the big game. And there's Cantina Lena. Flavors of Yucatan cuisine inspired by the concise and vibrant menu. Smoked meats, charred veggies, zesty ceviche. We hope you develop an addiction to the crunchy pork carnitas nachos or the crispy cheese and kimchi quesadilla. Oh, I hate that shit. I like the fusion, and it's like, oh, let's bring Korea into the Yucatan. It's just, oh. The Carlisle Room. The Bob Dylan mural sets the tone for this 70s revolution-inspired plant-forward dining room. Enjoy the Expanse Book of Booze while listening to DJs and enjoy Chef Desi's psychedelic menu, highlighting the full rainbow of plants. I love the restaurants where the workers are on display. The open kitchen, Look at the servants, paid minimum wage, cooking your very expensive food. We have the Dahlia Bakery that's next to the Dahlia Lounge, which had to relocate. It's on 4th now, further down the street, across from the Cinerama. Am I wrong? Home to the world-famous triple coconut cream pie. Dahlia Lounge. From the smell of the wood-burning grill to the swirl of world-class wine in the glass to the first bite of the Northwest Sea Bar. Very expensive is what they should write there. Edda's Seafood. Edda's big plate glass windows look out onto the bustle of the Pike Place Market. Well, not exactly. It's kind of at the north end, but close enough. Dungeness crab cakes. One of Tom Douglas's little secrets is that he has a commissary kitchen, so all his restaurants are in this one area, so he can make crab cakes in his factory and then send them out to all the different restaurants. Now, I'm not sure how much of that he does, but I know he does it. God, if Tom Douglas had to spend 5 minutes in each of his restaurants every day, there would not be enough hours in the day. So how much does he really give a shit about all these different genres? And Home Remedy, TD Home Remedy. Step up to the counter at Home Remedy, where our cooks are available to customize everything from savory rice bowls of There's Lola. That's one of his earlier places. Lola, Pacific Northwest mingled with Greece. So North African riffs, Anderson Valley lamb, Penn Cove's shellfish. That's a good place. It's expensive as fuck. So, Palace Kitchen. That might have been his second restaurant. Long been a Seattle favorite. Grilling whole trout and chickens over our applewood grill. Tom's Rub with Love Shack. Tom, I hope that you don't end up being an alleged sexual molester, because it doesn't sound right. It's actually his line of spice products. With the Rub with Love Shack, you can taste, smell, and experience all of Tom Douglas's Rub with Love products in action. Located in the Pike Place Market, enjoy sandwiches. Okay, so he's got a Pike Place Market little stall with his proprietary spices. At least he's not putting his name on like electric lemon juicers like the fucking Frugal Gourmet. The Seatown Market Diner, located in the market, is a snacks, chowder, ward off. Serious Pies, his attempt at pizza. The serious part is how expensive it is. The pizzeria with a bread baker's soul. Pies with blistered crusts. Just enough structure and bite. I love pizza wonkery as a genre unto itself, but I have to admit this pizza is really good. We have sustained a cult-like following for the past decade, okay? And then, of course, there is the Tom Douglas restaurant, Tanaka-san. A crisp, modern mashup of LA and Japan with dumplings, bento boxes, coconut beef, and delicious sake slushies. Sounds good. Again, if you've got so much going on, I don't expect the chef or the owner of the restaurant to be in the back working the line, but does Tom Douglas sit in some corporate office all day, just like going over numbers with his wife? Other properties. Tom Douglas and his wife and business partner Jackie have owned and run a farm in Prosser, Washington for the past decade. The farm delivers an average of 1,500 pounds of produce every week. Oh, so that's smart. So they are growing their own produce and then reselling it at their restaurants at a 1,000,000% markup. He's not stupid. Then there is the Palace Ballroom, 6,000 square feet of exposed brick and grand vintage windows, can seat up to 150 guests. Finally, there is the Hot Stove Society, a year-round cooking school. In other words, Tom Douglas is a wealthy man. Unfortunately, he's going to have to pay back a little bit of that in the form of chump change for the class action settlement.
Oh! Who was that? Boom bam bing bam bing bang. Boom bam bing bam bing bang. Boom bam bing bang. Bing bang boom bang bing bang.
November 5th, 2019, the Seattle Times. Kirti Vendatam writes, Employees and former workers at Tom Douglas restaurants will get $2.4 million in a class action settlement. The restaurant empire of Seattle chef Tom Douglas will pay out $2.4 million to more than 1,000 current and former employees after settling a class action lawsuit. The suit against the operator of Dahlia Lounge, Palace Kitchen, Brave Horse Tavern, and more than a dozen other local eateries accused the restaurants of not disclosing how much of a 20% service fee billed to customers went to the service workers and of not providing substantial rest and meal breaks. We have a $15 minimum wage law here in Seattle, and some small business owners have complained about it. But, restaurants are thriving all over the city, and the Tom Douglas empire, just from its economies of scale and having their own farm to grow their produce and charging outrageous prices, it's unusual. The great thing is that working at a good restaurant is such a hipster thing, and so many chefs started with Tom Douglas and then went on to open their own fabulous places, but you do not get paid well. And God forbid you went to the Art Institute of Seattle for a, $60,000 degree in cooking management or whatever it was. Of course, the Art Institute went out of business. Your degree is worthless. If you want to learn how to cook, apprentice with someone by going to work in a restaurant and read some fucking books. There's the internet out there. Okay, back to the Seattle Times. When Seattle increased its minimum wage from $9.19 to $15 in 2015, some restaurants instituted a surcharge or service fee they claimed would offset the burden of paying their service workers $15. Tom Douglas Seattle Kitchen, the corporate umbrella, I hate fucking corporate restaurant chains, especially the middling regional ones. The corporate umbrella for more than a dozen restaurants and businesses implemented a service fee of 20% of a customer's bill across its restaurants. It's legal for an employer to do that, said Mark Coate, the lead attorney, but they're required to disclose what portion of the charge goes to the service workers, so customers know where the money is going and so that employees are fairly paid. Again, no one working the line at a Tom Douglas place is fairly paid, but you'll see the argument, it's such a tough business. There's so many expenses. It's true, it's a tough business, but when you have a juggernaut like Tom Douglas, the Tom Douglas empire, it's less of a tough business, and you could hike up your employees. There's a little link here from the Seattle Times archives. Tom Douglas going straight to $15 an hour, adding 20% service charge at 3 restaurants. It's from 2016. On some of the menus and receipts in the Douglas restaurants, the disclosure read 20% service charge. 100% of these funds are distributed to our team in the form of wages, sales commissions, benefits, and revenue share. And the team would include Tom Douglas and his wife, the owners of the company. But plaintiffs said in the lawsuit the language wasn't clear enough. Customers reasonably believe service charges go to the employees who actually provide the service. Tom Douglas denied any wrongdoing in the settlement, but you did something wrong if you had to pay out $2.4 million. In my 40-year career, I have always tried to land on the side of the team when it comes to any business decision, Douglas said in a statement. It's hard to make an error when you put your team first. They're required to set up a confidential employee hotline for workers to air their grievances and to train supervisors on employment rights. If we had more time here and weren't wrapping up this episode, we'd be calling that hotline and having some fun. But
I'm going to confuse you a bit, but I've done that before.
So there's a review of Assembly Hall, Home Remedy, and Tanaka-san in The Stranger, our alt bi-weekly newspaper. Come the end of January, Tom Douglas's massive empire will be a little smaller. The celebrity chef slash restaurateur is closing 3 of his projects inside the Via 6 building at 6th and Lenora. You got 3 restaurants in one building? That's complete madness. I don't care how many Amazon drones are moving here that have the disposable income to go to these places. And there are thousands of them. You got South Lake Union. These places are packed. Earlier this month, Douglas settled a $2.4 million class action lawsuit for allegedly not properly disclosing how much of an included 20% service tax on customers' bills went to the workers. And to not providing adequate meal breaks. So there you go, the cutthroat world of Tom Douglas. His company is not huge enough that a $2 million hit isn't something. So I don't know how insurance works with that, and yeah, it's a tough business. If you want to start a restaurant, you're going to have to pay your labor. Ooh. You're going to have to pay for linens. You're going to have a water bill. You're going to have a gas bill. You're going to have equipment to buy, the food you're going to have to buy. It goes on and on and on. Insurance. It's a stupid business, and the economies of scale help crush the little guy. So for every one individual who wants to start just one little business, you're competing with Tom Douglas and his ruthless labor exploitation practices. So the great thing is that Tom Douglas, the reputation is how you get people to work in your restaurants, and his reputation sucks. So it's tough. I mean, I like his food. I don't like the dirty real estate, endless corporate expansion thing. I mean, he's going to have dozens of restaurants of different names in every city in the world, or is he going to go to Vegas? And he's a good guy, but this, it's a corporation now. He's just a figurehead for a giant money juggernaut, and that's sad because I bet he just wants to be back there on the line, whipping out his fare. Good luck, Tom. We'll see what happens to your empire in the future.
Ha ha! I knew I'd get you.
So, Mr. Tom Douglas, restaurateur, you have some image problems that no PR firm can fix.
Oh, you're just waiting for me to blow this, aren't you? I don't think that's very nice at all.
You made some mistakes. Your corporation made some mistakes. But at least you are not a rapist like the Frugal Gourmet. This has been the Doomed Planet podcast. We are part of the Wild World News Network. You can find us at doomedplanet.com. Goodbye.
Throw the meat on it, it climbs out of the pan. You throw it back in the pan, it climbs out again.
5, 6, 7, 8. Goodbye. This is the end of